Hi boys and girls. Tonight we're going to be talking about comparing decimals. One way that we can compare decimals is by using a model. Okay, so if we were comparing 1800ths and 2/10ths, we would shade 1800s. So we'd have two of these little hundreds left over. And we would share 2/10ths. So if you look at this picture, I see two whole sections shaded for 2/10ths, and I see 1800s shaded, but there are still two missing over here. So 1800ths is less than 2/10ths. And remember, we know that this is 1800s because the number 100, okay, has, or if we were looking at a dollar using a decimal, okay, after the decimal, there are two numbers, like in a dollar, that would be 100. If there's one number, we're talking about tenths. Another way is that we can use a number line. So if you're looking at a number line, and you bubble in 1800ths, and that would be about here. It's kind of hard to get it exact with my stylus. And 20 would be here. So you can clearly see that 18 is smaller. Another way is by comparing equal size parts. So 1800ths, or 8 is 1800ths. 0.2 is 2/10ths, which is equivalent to 2/100ths. I'm sorry, 20/100ths. So 2/10ths is equivalent to 20/100ths. So 1800ths, using this strategy, is still less than 20/100ths. So 0.1800ths is less than 0.2/10ths. Okay, but I think my favorite strategy is using place value. Place value is where you can compare numbers written as decimals by using place value. Comparing decimals is like comparing whole numbers. You always compare the digits in the greatest place value position first. So if I was comparing 0.70 and 0.60, or if I was even just comparing 60 and 70, I'm always going to start with that biggest place value of the largest number, which would be the tens and the ones. So 6 is smaller than 7, so 60 is smaller than 70, but the same thing here. I'm going to look at that first number first because the tenths, the numbers right after the decimal, is always larger than what comes next. So 7/10ths is larger, the 7/10ths position is larger than the 6th, so I know that this is the larger number. So here we have the model. If we were comparing 0.5 of a dollar or 5/10ths of a dollar and 5/100ths of a dollar, we could shade it in. And I'd shade half of these 5/10ths of a dollar. And then 5/100ths would only be 5 of these hundredths. So it's really clear looking at a model which one is bigger or comparing them. So 5/10ths, 0.5, is greater than 5/100ths, 0.05. But here's the place value. Just imagine a chart like this, where you start with the ones, which would be your whole numbers. So if you were talking about dollars, this would be $1.50. Your whole number would be 1. And then if you wrote 50 here, $1.50 would have $1, one whole, and 5/10ths, okay, or 50/100ths. All right. So often this place value chart can really help. So now if we were comparing those two amounts above, we would have 0.5 and then 0.05. And just like I shared above, we're going to look in the places of the greatest value of the number, which would be the whole numbers. But there's a 0 in both positions there, so that didn't help. Let's go to the next digit. And I see this number has a 5, and this number has a 0. So that means right away that 5/10 is greater than 5/100. So take out a sheet of loose leaf and take notes on the ways to compare decimals that we've learned so far. Start with the title, the part that's underlined above, so ways to compare decimals. After you write each way, draw a quick picture or example of each way. So we learned about using a model. Remember, we used a model that was broken up into hundredths, and then a model broken up into tenths. Then we used a number line. You guys know what that looks like. So we have 0 and so forth. And then we used place value. So we had the ones and the tens, and this is where our decimal is, and the hundredths. Okay. So pause the video and take a moment to do that. All right, now the only thing that we haven't talked about, what if we're talking about and comparing a number that has a whole number and a number that is not a whole number? So when you see a model, it becomes very clear. So 1.3, 1 3/10, that would be one whole, and then just 3 of these, compared to 0.6 or 6/10. So that would be compared to just 6 of these. So you can clearly see that this one, 1.3 or 1 3/10, is larger than 6/10. So if one number has a whole number and the other number doesn't, then that would be a larger number. Okay, now it's your turn to try. We're going to have, we'll go over these tomorrow in class. So you can use this place value chart or use a number line. So we're going to write 0.7 and then 0.54. So first thing I would look at is the place of the greatest value, which would be the whole numbers, and both have 0. So then I'm going to go to the next place, and we are the tenths. This first number has 7/10. The second number has 5/10. So since 7 is greater than 5, that would mean that 0.7 is greater than 0.54 or 54 hundredths. So 7/10 is greater than 54 hundredths. Pause the video and take a minute and try number 5. Okay, so what I did was I wrote these down. Eventually you won't have to write them down. You'll just kind of see this in your head. 4.5, and I'm going to line them up. So if you don't always have to write the whole chart out, just line the numbers up. And 2.89. So I'm going to look at the place of the greatest value first, which would be the ones or the whole numbers. And since 4 is greater than 2, this is the number with the greater value. So 4.5 is greater than 2.89. So 4 5/10 is greater than 2 89 hundredths. And all I had to do is look at that first number. Now if that first number was zeros, then I would go to the tenths and look for the tenths that had the greatest value. If those were both the same, then I would go to the hundredths and see which number was greater or less than in the hundredths, and so forth. So use these strategies to complete your check tomorrow, or to complete your check tonight, and we'll go over these tomorrow in class.